animal welfare. All I can say is that every time a big truck drives by with pigs inside of it, I do cry, and they look very sad.
Can you tell me what the Farm Bill is?
Nope. Farm Bill? Yeah, nope.
Animal welfare? Well, I assume that's when an animal family is below the poverty line and receives additional support from the government. So the Farm Bill is the man who has worked on the farm for 80 years.
Tell me, what do you know about Proposition 12 in California?
Oh, nothing.
I know nothing about that. I'm so sorry.
Animal welfare, like how they take care of the animals.
You know, agricultural and food things.
I don't know what the Farm Bill is.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the CAP Podcast. My name is Sydney Schnorr and today we are going to be talking to Tessa and Amy about milk in How Is Your Milk Raised? So with that, we'll hop right in.
Welcome to How Is Your Milk Raised? Organic versus Conventional Dairy Production. My name is Amy Schaefer. I'm a senior in Agricultural Communications and Agricultural and Rural Policy Studies, and with me is my co-host Tessa Halverson, a senior in Agricultural Communications. We're here today to talk about organic versus conventional dairy production. We'll be discussing the basic information you need to know and then bring in some experts to expand a little bit more.
The terms conventional and organic often create confusion in the marketplace, as many people are unaware of how these products are produced. Organic dairy production has to meet certain land, feed, livestock origin, livestock living conditions, and livestock healthcare practices. For some examples, organic dairy cattle must be fed organic feeds, must live on pasture or property that is certified organic, which has very strenuous requirements, and may not be treated for any diseases, conditions, or other health issues. If you are interested in learning more, the USDA has a complete list of organic certification requirements.
Conventional dairy production still maintains a quality product as well as adequate animal welfare and production practices without having as many do's and don'ts. According to the Clear Center at UC Davis, dairy cows are typically confined to a barn. This allows farmers to closely monitor health while simultaneously providing clean sleeping areas, nutritious diets, and keeping them protected from inclement weather.
Some other important notes to make about conventional versus organic production are cost and production. According to an article published by the USDA, organic production costs more than conventional production by 50% per hundredweight of milk. In turn, this also created a higher cost on the consumer, making organic milk more expensive to purchase. According to Mississippi State Extension, when it comes to production, organic herds produce 15% less milk per cow than cows raised under conventional practices.
A final important note is that there is no significant nutritional difference between conventional and organic produced milk. There's only a variance in the production methods and requirements. Discussing the difference between conventional and organic dairy production is relevant as it affects multiple areas of society. Consumers tend to be confused by the two labels. Consumers may be paying a higher premium for production practices they may or may not support. For dairy farmers, it's a large commitment and monetary change to move to organic farming. There is a 3-year process to start organic production. It is vital that they know all the information between the two production practices before making their decisions. Finally, dairy cattle are impacted by this topic. Each method has pros and cons regarding animal treatment, which we will discuss later on in this podcast with our experts. This topic also connects to larger discussions on sustainable agricultural practices, food labeling, and consumer education.
In this podcast, we will provide listeners with insights into what these production practices mean, the implications of choosing one over the other, and how these choices can align with their personal values and beliefs. Given the rising interest in ethical consumption and the ongoing debates around food production, this topic is both timely and valuable.
Dr. Larry Tranel is an agriculture and natural resources dairy field specialist for Iowa State University Extension. He received an undergraduate degree in agricultural economics and international agriculture, as well as his master's degree in agricultural industries from UW-Platteville. He spent 10 years as a dairy farm management agent for UW Extension and has been in his current position with Iowa State for over 20 years. With many years of both professional and personal experience in the field, Dr. Tranel is here to discuss with us organic dairy production. Can you just give us a brief overview of what organic dairy production is?
Okay, so organic dairy production is basically a system out there that they can't use pesticides or any kind of chemicals on the crops. And so that's kind of a 3-year thing, like to transfer it over into organic. It takes about 3 years to transition the land. So it's 3 years after the last chemical application, which usually happens in June or July. So in reality, it's probably like a 2.5 year thing. The dairy cows themselves have to be organic for at least a year before they come in. And once they're in the system, and once the producer's starting, then they have to be raised on the farm organically. Okay, so there's a little bit of a leeway when they first get started. So they can't use antibiotics. They can still use vaccinations and a lot of, just kind of home health type remedies that they can use. There's just a big list of things that are approved and what's not approved. And so they just have to follow that list. And so then every year the farmers have to go through this organic certification. So they have to pick out one of the organic certifiers. And you have to go through a pretty detailed thing that sometimes, depending on the size of the farm, might take a couple hours, might take most of the day. But they've actually got to show their records of, seed that they purchased, different types of fertilizers that they might have purchased, just make sure they're all kosher to organic.
In your experience, what would you recognize as some of the benefits of organic dairy production?
I think cow health tends to be a good one. It's kind of tough though, like on the flip side, because they can't use antibiotics. Sometimes there's cows that might have to leave the herd, either go into somebody else's herd, or they just may have to cease being part of an organic herd. So, or they may actually possibly not make it just because they can't use the antibiotics, and there might not be another avenue before they can get the animal to market. So there's a little bit of flip side with that. And then when we take a look at like with the crop ground, and a lot of advantages there, just because when you take a look at not using any chemicals, pesticides, herbicides, or whatever, I think a lot of times soil health, they make big claims that it's a lot better. But on the flip side there, they tend to have to use more tillage. So it's either use the herbicides or they can add different types of chemicals, or you got to do more tillage. And so even though there's benefits, there's also kind of some trade-offs with different types of things. But I think the bottom line is people just don't like all those chemicals in their food system. And so once it's, applied to a crop, just with corn or whatever, because a lot of crops that are sold as organic as well, that make it into the food stream. So I think that's probably one of the biggest benefits of it.
What are some of the misconceptions you've heard about organic dairy production, and how would you address those misconceptions?
Okay, so misconceptions on organic is I think it doesn't come so much from the consumer side of things, but it comes from other farmers, about thinking that you can't get the production out of them. You're not going to get as many bushels of corn. And I think a lot of those misperceptions, and we actually have an organic dairy farm. And so just when you take a look at, letting them know that we can still get 200, 230 bushels to the acre for corn. And we still have some, milk production averages over 24,000 pounds of milk on a grass-based organic system. And, so I think we can kind of just kind of quell a lot of those comments and thought processes or the misconceptions in that way. But for most of the consumers, they take a look at just the safety of the product. I think that's one of the bigger things, again, like we talked about with the chemicals and trying to reduce that chemical usage. And so they're willing to pay, and it shows that they're willing to pay. And so like right now, there's a few different types of milk that we're kind of short on. So they're kind of begging for organic milk right now. And so even though it might only be 5 to 7% of the total dairy market, it's still, we just can't fill the orders with it as much. And, the same way that they're looking for goat milk and they're looking for A2 milk and they're looking for grass-fed milk, which is an organic farm as well. It's just that they can't use grain. And so it's a kind of totally different system. So I just think the misconceptions are probably more on from farmer to farmer and what's possible with it.
Obviously, part of organic dairy production is the certification process. Do you think, this certification, especially because it's on the product, like it's something that you actually visually see on the product, influences a lot of customers? Do you think they're educated about what it really means and what the production type really means? Just kind of overall, what your perspective of the relationship of the consumer and then that organic certification seal?
Yeah, I think the seal means quite a bit. but it might not mean as much of a seal like just with grass fed. I think the grass fed time tends to, take a good part of people's perception as well as being a very healthy product. So whether it's organic or not, when they say grass fed, they kind of go after that a little bit because there's different types of things that are in the grass fed milk that might not be in the conventional milk as much. So I think when you take a look at the whole thought process of what organic is trying to do, the seal is definitely important. And I think when you take a look at like farmer, are they educated as their consumers? That word organic carries a lot of weight. That the word grass fed carries a lot of weight. We never thought like A2, which is kind of a protein in the milk, would carry a lot of weight, but it seems like we can't fill that demand either. So there's a lot of different types of things that, the consumers I think are definitely getting smarter about what they are, because when you take a look at like an A2 milk, it just somebody's got to be reading something or whatever they want it.
Direction do you see kind of on the production side, but also the product side? What direction do you see that moving when it comes to organic versus conventional and kind of consumer preference?
Yeah, I mean, so the organics really kind of came into play like in like 1989, 1990 timeframes, like when the big business like Organic Valley actually started. And so when you take a look at, where they've come from way back then when they had 0% of the market to about anywhere from 5 to 7% of the market, depending how they look at it. So you've actually taken a look at just even a small piece of it. At this point, I don't see it decreasing in total production. Sometimes it might increase a little bit in percentage, depending on what the conventional side does, how much they produce. But I think it's going to be pretty stable as a percent of the market, or probably even growing a little bit. But it might grow in some other facets, which might be organic plus grass fed, or organic plus A2, or organic plus something else.
Our final question for you: organic milk production does come with a cost premium. Could you comment on why you think consumers should purchase organic milk and justify the premium?
Yeah, so when you take a look at the premium, and I'm not sure how much conventional, what the difference is percentage wise, but I know it's definitely at least probably twice as expensive. And you take a look at a lot of it's the younger generation, it's the mothers that are feeding their kids with it. So I think when you take a look at is it worth it? I guess if it's a food safety issue and a perception of that, I think it's definitely worth it for a lot. Otherwise, they wouldn't be buying it. Some brands kind of command a little bit more in the marketplace than other brands of organic milk. But when you take a look at just the whole host of it, yeah, just there's a new generation that are a lot closer, wanting to get back to not so much getting back to the land, but the thought process is let's kind of work with what's safer, more whole food. And you can kind of, notice that, a lot of those organic whole food type places, I mean, they're sprouting up all over the place, and people spending big bucks to use it, to buy stuff from.
Thank you to Dr. Tranel for the insight into the organic dairy production world. And now we'll be hearing from our next guest on conventional dairy production.
Ryan Wolf is a senior at Iowa State University studying animal science with a passion for dairy science. Growing up on a conventional dairy farm in northeast Iowa, Ryan started in the industry at a young age. His heavy involvement in the Dairy Science Club, the Iowa State University Dairy Science Program, and the dairy industry as a whole, Ryan brings an excellent and realistic perspective on conventional dairy production.
So, can you just give us a brief overview of your connection to the dairy industry?
Yeah, so I appreciate the introduction to begin with too. But so I grew up in a little small town in eastern Iowa, or kind of outside of that small town, on a dairy farm. We milked around 250 head of cattle, and I kind of got into showing cattle as well. Was pretty involved in my local FFA chapter as well. And then after graduating high school, I knew I kind of want to stick with the industry, so I chose Iowa State to kind of continue on my education so that I could learn more about the dairy industry and kind of the opportunities that are out there for me.
Perfect. Can you briefly explain what conventional dairy production is to you?
Yeah, so when I think of conventional dairy production, I think of kind of not only maximizing the amount of milk that we can get out of our cows, but I also kind of think of maximizing the amount of crop we can get off the field to ensure that we're able to channel as much of that nutrients into milk as we can. Growing up, we did do a little bit of crop rotation and stuff like that to kind of help with like nitrogen levels in the soil, but we were never afraid to kind of look at bring in anhydrous if we need to, using fertilizers to make sure that we're getting the best crop possible as well. So I mean, being environmentally conscious is definitely something, but we've always looked at what's the best way we can maximize with the input in the investment that we're making.
Perfect. Okay, and then what would you say are some of the main advantages of conventional dairy production compared to organic dairy production?
I would start off really just with regulation. When you think about, while in college, I had the opportunity to kind of do an internship out in California and work with some organic dairy farmers out there. And one of the things that's always a pain in their side is the regulations and, what kind of feed you can buy, what kind of bedding you can use, so that everything that you do from, whether you are growing your own feed or whether you are buying your own buying that feed, everything has to follow this very strict regulation. And in more in conventional dairy, you kind of get the opportunity to channel it in different ways. You can kind of produce at different levels, to kind of depending on what you're comfortable with, and there's just way less regulation.
To kind of go along with that, are there any specific issues with organic certification that you think consumers should be aware of?
I would say, and not even so much, it's definitely a concern for organic, because we see it more and more, especially since the state of Iowa has deregulated their laws regarding raw milk consumption. I think that there's a rush to slap a label onto something that it's not only raw milk, but it's also organic milk. And I think one of the things that just kind of comes along with that is we have our FDA has some pretty strict standards when it comes to producing, how does that milk go through the production line after it's off the farm. And so I think one of the things specifically with our organically raised milk versus that conventionally raised milk is that conventional raised milk, we know that animal is going to be treated anytime she's sick. She's going to be provided with the most proper care, because where the organic, you kind of hit those roadblocks where it's like, okay, well, the minute maybe you put some sort of antibiotic in this animal, it can never be used in an organic production line. So I would say that kind of just goes back to maximizing what you can get out of that animal, and also doing it in a way that we know is safe, and we know what we're putting into our into the food line is safe as well for consumption.
Kind of along those lines, in your opinion, how well does conventional dairy production meet consumer expectations for quality of milk as well as animal welfare compared to organic?
I would say on kind of, from my experience working in conventional and getting to observe organic, specifically on the animal welfare side of it, being able, where some of those organic dairy farms, they like to promote how much they turn their animals out to pasture and, kind of let them graze and that kind of stuff. My one thing though is like, we can do that, but are the organic farmers taking that time to monitor those animals when they're not in the barn being milked? That's the one thing, with my experience in conventional dairy farming, is our cows are always there. We're always able to keep an eye on them. We're making sure that they're safe. Maybe our cows don't get to go out to pasture like the organic cows do, but our eyes are always on those cows. So that's definitely one thing too. And there's another part of that question too.
Milk quality.
Okay, yeah. So milk quality, again, it kind of just goes back to, we know that we're growing high quality feed, and we're working heavily with our nutritionists as well all the time to make sure that the feed that we're giving those animals is high quality. Where organic, if you're not able to grow that feed, you're buying it. Okay, yeah, it's certified organic, but is it the quality of feed that's gonna that you're gonna provide to that cow, and then is she gonna turn around and make it into high quality milk with meeting those protein and fat standards, and able to produce enough of it as well. So,
what would you say to someone who argues that organic dairy is better for the animals?
I think. I kind of touched on it a little bit, where in the way that I know conventional dairy farming, and the way that I've seen it done, and the way that I've myself done it, it really comes down to how much time are you willing to invest into the care of that animal. I don't necessarily think that there has to be a debate between do organic farmers provide better living standards to cows, or do conventional farmers provide those better living standards? I think it comes down to just someone who's dedicated to their industry and dedicated to the craft that they're trying. But again, in my experience with the conventional dairy farming, our cows are there. We see them all the time. We know if something's wrong right off the bat. I don't see a lot of organic dairy farmers out there with some of the precision ag technology that like we've taken a hold of, when it comes to like collars or even activity boluses and stuff like that. So I would say that, as long as you're dedicated to what you're doing and you have a passion for it, you're always going to take care of those animals pretty well. But I definitely know as a conventional farmer, we've held those standards of welfare.
What are some misconceptions you've heard about conventional dairy production, and how would you address those?
One of the words one of the phrases that I hear so often and I read about too, this term factory farming, and I hate that. I hate that term because I don't hate a lot of things. That's a word I don't like to use a lot either. But I think it comes down to, again, what a conventional dairy farmer is trying to do, while giving these animals the best life that he can possibly do. He's trying to provide for a world and meet demand. And conventional dairy farming gives you that opportunity to maximize the feed that you're putting into those animals, gives you a array of genetic selection that you can choose from to maximize the amount of milk that you're getting out of your animals. And so I think that when we use this word factory farm and we tie it into like conventional farming, whether it be dairy farming or any other sort of food animal production, I don't like that word because I think there's a lot there to unpack and understand that one bad apple shouldn't spoil, the whole truckload either. So if there's anything I could just get rid of is using this term factory farming when we were referring to like conventional dairy farming.
Last question for you. Where do you see the industry growing? Obviously, organic milk has kind of grown, and as you mentioned, that raw term, everything is kind of popping up a little bit differently. Where do you see the future of milk production and kind of that industry going?
It's pretty interesting. We're a month past a pretty milestone election in the United States, and as we've started to see what this new administration is going to do in positions like USDA and Health and Human Services and FDA, I think that we're really going to start to look into, specifically within the dairy industry, the nutrient value that comes with milk. And I think RFK Jr., if nominated to be the next Secretary of Health and Human Services, is going to do a lot with continuing to push the consumption of raw milk. From what I've read and what I understand, he's a pretty big fan of it. Once again, I have my own reservations about it just because of what I know about the production line and pasteurization and stuff like that. But I think we're going to see. I do believe we're going to continue to see the organic label at the grocery store. I think we're going to start to see more with raw milk as well. Though I wouldn't say that it's necessarily going to impact what we know as that audience that usually gravitates towards just your conventional milk. They go to the store, look for the cheapest 2% option that they can. And I don't think we're going to lose much of that base, but I do think people are going to become more more conscious about the decisions that they're making for their health. I mean, at the end of the day, though, milk is definitely a healthy option to have in your diet. So whichever way you feel comfortable putting it in there, I'm a supporter of. So.
Thank you, Ryan, for coming to chat with us about conventional dairy production. And now we'll move on to our third guest, who will talk from a neutral perspective. For this portion of our episode, we would like to welcome Dr. Gail Carpenter. Dr. Carpenter is an assistant professor of extension and outreach at Iowa State University in the Department of Animal Science. She received her undergraduate degree from Michigan State in animal science, her master's from the University of Minnesota in animal science, and her PhD from Kansas State University in animal science and industry. Dr. Carpenter has many publications, awards, and involvement in the industry. With a specific interest and experience in nutrition and management, Dr. Carpenter is going to speak with us about organic dairy cattle production from a neutral perspective. Welcome, Dr. Carpenter, and thanks for chatting with us.
So happy to be here.
So just to kick the conversation off, could you explain a little bit of your background and kind of your connection to the dairy industry?
Oh, gosh. Well, you did a great job of overviewing it already. I'm from central Michigan. I'm from about half an hour south of Lansing. And I don't come from a dairy farm. My parents were both teachers, and so they had plenty of other things to do with their time besides farm. But I was really involved in 4-H and fell in love with the dairy industry through my involvement in 4-H and my 4-H projects. And loved it so much I decided to get a career in it. So I got experience by working on dairy farms and doing some internships, like a lot of students these days do. And then got so excited about it, I just kept studying it for what seemed like forever. So I did, like you said, my master's at Minnesota, my PhD at K-State. I got to do some on-farm research while I lived at K-State, which was really cool. I actually got to live in Nebraska for a couple months while I did that. So after my PhD, I lived in Canada for a couple years and taught up there, but also worked with the industry up there a little bit. Then decided to spend some time in industry for a little while. So I lived in Ohio, and I was a nutritionist down in Ohio for a company down there, a dairy nutritionist. And then I missed working with students, so I came back to academia and got a job at Iowa State. And my job now is 60% extension, which means that I spend a lot of time doing outreach with our dairy producers here in the state of Iowa. So I coach the Dairy Challenge team, which is a farm evaluation competition. And so because of that and because of my job with extension, I always try to stay as in touch with the industry as possible. So it's a really cool job because I get to do the student stuff and the teaching stuff, but I also get to stay very involved with industry. So
very cool. Yeah, it sounds like you're really busy.
Yeah, that is accurate. Yeah.
To kind of get more into the organic and conventional production conversation, could you briefly describe the main differences between organic and conventional production?
Oh gosh, this is something that I haven't actually studied up on in a long time, so I don't want to say anything wrong. But I know organic does have some restrictions around some of the feeds you can use. They have restrictions around antibiotic use and around GMOs, and they have some expectations for pasture access and grazing. Those are some of the main differences that come to mind. To get into the real details of that, I'm sure you'll have other experts that can talk more about that. But those are some of the main big differences that you'll see. Yep.
Perfect. Okay, and then kind of in your evaluation experience with production in different facilities, could you talk about maybe some of the different or benefits and drawbacks of each production type, looking at animal welfare, efficiency, and then product quality?
Yeah, sure. So some of the things that I like to think about when I talk about niche markets is, to me, you can find good players and bad players within any industry, right? Or within any production type system. So if you think of like tie stall versus freestall barns, even, you can find people who manage both of those really well, and you can find people who manage both of those very poorly. So when we talk about things like animal health and animal welfare and well-being, I think it's really important to kind of separate. The system isn't necessarily going to dictate how good the welfare is for the cattle that are being raised in that system. So I've been on some different organic dairy farms, and I've been on some that do a fantastic job. And it's they're out on pasture, and it's these rolling green hills, and it's like everything you see on the side of a milk carton, right? It's and the cows, you can tell that they're well cared for, and they're in good condition, and they're healthy. And I've been on some other farms that they're not being managed as well, and you can see that there's some opportunities for welfare and well-being of those cows. But it's the same thing in freestall facilities. I've been in some great barns where the cows are basically like air conditioned and sleeping on these really well batted sand-bedded stalls, and it's like they get a beach day. And I've been in some conventional freestalls that aren't. Right. So I think that's to me, it can be a mistake to kind of mix those two things together and say, well, one is better for animal welfare than the other, because it's possible to do any system well, but it's also possible to do any system poorly. And what we want to do when we're working with dairy producers is help all producers, whether they be organic or conventional, grass-fed, whatever niche market they're in, we want to help them be able to understand what their cows need and help them improve animal welfare regardless of the system that they're in. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Did you have any benefits or drawbacks of like production or production efficiency or product quality?
Sure. Yeah. So one thing that you'll find with organic is sometimes they'll have a slightly different fatty acid composition of milk, and that is more to do with the grass. And you can be grass-fed without being organic, and you can be. You have to have some pasture access though to be organic. But so we'll see some difference in fatty acid composition of the milk fat. I always kind of chuckle though. So say grass-fed milk, you have different CLA composition, but potential benefits for human health there, it's anti-carcinogenic, et cetera. But then you buy skim milk, right? Okay, there's no milk fat in there, so
Yeah.
so you're not getting any milk fat benefit from that, right? So it's, I don't know, I just chuckle at that. One thing that is interesting is a lot of times people will notice a difference in taste between organic milk and conventional milk. And again, there's so many confounding factors to think about because organic milk is often ultra high temperature pasteurized. And so it's cooked at a higher temperature to be more shelf stable because it doesn't move off the shelves as quickly. And so that can result in a slightly different taste, but that's not from being organic. That's from being a different pasteurization method than we normally use. So any milk that you buy at the grocery store is going to be safe. Any dairy products that you buy at the grocery store, yogurt, cheese, cottage cheese, sour cream, whatever it is going to be safe. It's going to be pasteurized. May or may not be homogenized, but homogenization is more of a sensory thing than a food safety thing. So I encourage folks that, work with your preference and what makes you feel good about the products that you're purchasing. And if people are buying dairy products from dairy producers and at the grocery store, then I think that's ultimately a really good thing because it makes the industry stronger, whether that's conventional or organic.
Mm-hmm. A large part of being involved in the dairy industry is being involved with consumers. How could you explain the difference between conventional and organic dairy production specifically to a consumer?
So when I talk to consumers about this, like when I talk to my friends' moms, right, and they are ultimately concerned about the safety of their product, right? They're feeding their families. They want to make sure that it's safe to feed their families, that it's wholesome, and that it's something that isn't having a negative impact on the cows or the producers that are involved. And so I tend to talk to them kind of just like I did with you guys, right? Mm-hmm. Kind of saying, this is my experience working with farmers, and I know people who are organic farmers, and I know people who are conventional farmers, and there can be people who aren't doing the best job, but by and large, farmers are not in it because it's fun, right? They're doing it because it's something that they're passionate about and they love, and it's not like it is fun. It's not always
Easy.
Easy, yes. It's if it was easy, everybody would do it. Yep. And so they do it because they have a passion for it and a love for it. Yeah. And ultimately, we can always be better. And there's some people that have a lot of room to move up and a lot of opportunity to improve. But ultimately, you're in it because you want the lifestyle and you're passionate about feeding the world and working with cattle.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. So obviously when you walk down the grocery store aisle with the milk in it, there's probably 20 different products that you can get nowadays. And it all has different labeling on it, probably meaning different things as well. Do you think from an industry's perspective there's a need for more education around organic and conventional labels as well as production styles? Or do you think consumers are generally well informed?
I do not think consumers are generally well informed. It seems like we do have a tendency to. So let me back up. I love niche markets. I think they're fantastic to help dairy producers stay competitive and find different ways to be able to market their products and always innovate towards constant improvement, right? And so we have people who will go organic or grass-fed or some of these other, ways to kind of market their product in unique ways. Part of that, though, sometimes comes from we always come up with like new label ideas, Mm-hmm. So one of the favorites is, this is milk not. I was just looking at the milk carton this morning and it said not made with hormones. And I was like, what does made with hormones even mean? You don't make milk with hormones, mm-hmm. right?
Yeah.
Or RBST free. Very few farms use RBST anymore because most co-ops won't buy it if you're using RBST. So it's like sometimes you'll see like water that's GMO free, right? There's no such thing as GMO free water. Like, so I think that as we kind of market for some of these unique things, sometimes we just confuse consumers more and more. And when it comes to, so organic has like you have to follow specific standards to be labeled organic, but not every niche market does. And so I think the more we label it, sometimes we can confuse the consumer more and more. So it's kind of a tricky issue, and I don't know if there's really a right answer, because on the one side, you want farmers to be able to do a great job marketing their milk and find these things that might appeal to different consumers, and they might consumer milk and they wouldn't have otherwise, without confusing people. And so education is incredibly important when it comes to that. And I know like Midwest Dairy does a great job of trying to educate folks. And a lot of our checkoff organizations will do a lot of outreach on that. And we do some of that even here at Iowa State. We have our dairy farm open house and try to educate people at least about like what goes on at a dairy farm. But yeah, the moral of the story is, yes, education is incredibly important, and the more we can do, the better.
I just feel like there's a lack of consumer awareness, not only in the dairy industry, but in agriculture as a whole.
Yeah.
And it's, we need to bridge that gap between consumers and farmers.
Exactly.
To kind of round out this portion of our episode, we will ask our final question. Where do you see the future of the industry going when it comes to production style?
That is a really good question. It could go a bunch of different ways. I do see, and this isn't unique to organic or conventional, but this is something that can be used by both systems, is I see a lot more opportunity for some precision technologies and using labor-reducing technologies. And they can be really great for both systems for different reasons and for overlapping reasons as well. But, as we decrease reliance on hormones. Hormones can be a great example there. We use hormones for fertility purposes with dairy cattle. And if we can replace some of that, or at least augment that with heat detection technologies, for example, and maintain high fertility in our herds while decreasing our reliance on hormones, then that's good for any system. Health is another thing. So using activity monitors for health monitoring and being able to identify cows and prevent disease before it gets to treatment, right? There's with organic restrictions around antibiotic use, but ultimately I think there's some lessons that conventional can learn about that too, because we want to decrease antibiotic resistance, and the fewer antibiotics you use, you're decreasing that antibiotic resistance, and you're making your vet bill a little bit cheaper too. So I really see a lot of these technologies being able to help both kinds of systems really advance and help us care for our cows and promote animal welfare and well-being while maintaining a profitable farm.
Perfect. Well, thank you for chatting with us today.
Yes, thank you so much.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you for listening to How Is Your Milk Raised podcast. We hope you learned something new about organic and conventional dairy cattle production. If you are looking for more information, we highly recommend conducting additional research and finding the best option for you and your family. Thank you to our guests, and thank you for listening.
Thank you so much to Amy and Tessa and their wonderful guests they brought on today. It was such a wonderful conversation to listen to. I learned a lot, and I hope all of you did too. With that, we'll close out the podcast, and we'll see you next time on CAP. To email us with any comments, questions, or concerns, please send us an email at contemporary@iastate.edu.